Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway.
Welcome back to Paris History Avec Hemingway. Today we're talking about the Canal Saint-Martin, and Claudine's going to tell us all about it.
Yeah, this is not an area that I spend a lot of time in. How about you?
I actually spent a lot of time there because it's not far from me.
Oh,
And there's lots of picnicking and fun bars along the canal. So it's not far from me. It's a lot closer, I think, from to Montmartre.
yeah, yeah. It's a lot of people call it the trendy part, and it definitely is we'll explain some of the history of that and why that kind of is, but it is definitely more of the trendier part. I have a lot of clients that are going to Paris and they want to stay there, and it isn't exactly close to the city center. So if you're going to Paris and you want to like walk everywhere, it's usually not the best location. But if you've been to Paris a few times and you want to stay there, it's easy to hop on the metro and get anywhere you need to go.
Exactly. And it's like
Yeah.
you said, it's very young and fun. So it's a great place to
Yeah.
discover.
It is. So we'll start today's walk really close to the Gare de l'Est, which is the train station that's really close. It's only like a couple blocks away from the canal. And there is a church there, the Église Saint-Laurent, and it's at 68 Boulevard de Magenta. And it's right there, just like if you're standing out in front of the church and you look to your left, you'll see the Gare de l'Est. This was once the north-south access road that was for the Roman road going back to the first century.
Wow.
So it's pretty old. It served also as part of the pilgrimage road that people would take that would be following the Saint Denis route when they would start in Paris and then head up through Saint Denis. They would walk right past here and past this church. A church that stood here on this spot, the original one dedicated to Saint Laurent, went back to the 6th century. So that is, much closer to the time of Saint Denis. The first church was destroyed by the Normans in 885, and then the next church was built in 1180, but it was too small, and so it led to the current church that you see if you go here, that was built in 1429.
1420.
Which is
Wow.
which that it always still when the first time that I was really going to Paris, I'm meeting a lot of French people, and they would say, oh, America, it's just so young, and you don't really think about that until you are out of it. Because then you think of like this thing based of 1429, and in America, when something's built in the 1800s, it's like that's really old.
Yeah, exactly.
And here it's like 1429. That's like a drop in the bucket. But
Mhm.
has an Italian Gothic facade, a lot like Elizabeth de Aumarais, which is another church that's over in the Haute Marais. Under Haussmann, when the boulevard, the streets right out here were created, the intersection, the facade of the church was destroyed. And so the facade was recreated in the 19th century in 1863 with this Gothic, flamboyant Gothic facade. And then it now has a fancy spire on the top. It's a very reminiscent of the one that we had on Notre Dame that's already under construction now to be replaced. But it was really great the first time I went there, and I really wanted to see the spire. Of course, it was covered in scaffolding and you could not see it at all. Which seems to be my luck when I wait to go. Like I like have these things on the list of like, okay, now I got to go to this, church that's in the middle of nowhere and look at this. And then I get there and the entire interior is scaffolding. I'm like, okay, well, we'll come back in a couple of years.
Nice try.
Yeah, nice try. But in 1768, Jean Bécot married Guillaume de Berry. So that was Guillaume de Berry. If you remember when we did the podcast a year or so ago about Madame du Barry, she ended up, her original name was Jean Bécot, and she ended up marrying this Guillaume du Barry just so she could actually be able to attend court of Louis XV, because she was basically a prostitute, and you couldn't be mingling around the king, and so he had to find somebody that would just like marry her off, so she could get that title, so it would be okay that she would be in there.
Of
Which
course.
is, I mean, it's probably not that much different than some things today.
Yeah, no lie.
I mean, when you look at some people, like some members of society, like some billionaires not can't just marry, some girl from the other side of the tracks.
I keep it in the hierarchy of social classes.
Yeah, I gotta keep it in that, in that blood. But this is also the formal burial site of the Sanson family, and most people probably don't know the Sanson family, but you definitely know what they did, because the family business of the Sansons, including Charles Henri, was that they were executioners, and Charles Henri was the one who dropped the blade on over 2,500 people, including Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette.
Oh, that's horrible.
So it was like their whole family. Like he did it, his father did it, his grandfather did it. Like I just don't know if that's the family business you want to like pass down.
I guess yeah, definitely not. That's not something I want to keep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of gross. But between the church, there is a garden, the Jardin Villemain. That was where there was a convent of the Recollets was. It was made up in the 15th century Franciscan order. A monastery was first there in January of 1604 and enlarged by Marie de Medici in August 1614. And survived just until the Revolution in 1790, and in 1802 became the Hospice of the Incurable Men, and eventually the St. Martin Military Hospital that served many of the victims of the Prussian War and even World War One. During World War One, the Big Bertha dropped a huge shell on the monastery, and it struck the church and almost destroyed it.
Yikes.
Yeah, which I can't. I mean, I can't even imagine being, it there when you're just waiting for a bomb to come dropping out of the sky. But if you walk down there, there's a former entrance to the hospital that was there. The 18th century building remains on the edge of the garden, but it's now an artist atelier. So I'm sure you probably have had somebody on the podcast that maybe even works out of there. I don't think it's open to the public. I was doing some research, but we should figure out a way to sneak in there.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. But the hospital was there. It stretched out. It was named for the Dr. Jean-Antoine Villemain, who was also work treating men coming back to Paris that were wounded in other conflicts and wars. The garden that's right there was just a really lovely garden. It's pretty good size too. It was created in 1977, and it was expanded over time to be twice the size, which is what it is today. There is a cast iron water fountain in there, which is kind of the coolest thing in the whole garden. It was commissioned under an 1846 order to add more fountains to the city, and 24 species of the were done all over the Rue de Faubourg Saint-Martin, which is where this one once lived until 1977, then was moved into the garden. Marie Auguste Martin designed the neo-Baroque beauty. And the child on top of it, it's really, really cool. It doesn't have water running through it anymore, but it's pretty huge, and it's cast iron. So it's like the Wallace fountains, that material. There's two children on the top of it with dolphins. And if you look closely, there's these cute, tiny little turtles on it. And just above that is a signature of the artist. These actually predate the Wallace fountains. So they're older than the Wallace fountains. And they used to just sit on the Rue Faubourg Saint-Martin, just there, just like kind of some of the Wallace fountains are. But luckily they moved it in here because it's kind of an absolute work of art. It's really cool.
I need to see that. We need to sneak in.
I'm surprised you haven't done any photo shoots over there in that little garden.
Maybe I have and I just forgotten.
Yeah. So the whole area of the Canal Saint-Martin is because it is a canal and it goes through the city. It was made up of 9 locks and foot and traffic bridges that cross over them. And so it actually has the locks that, they open and close. You go down the Quai de Jamop, and it follows the canal where you'll find the Hotel du Nord, which is right there. And the Hotel du Nord, this to me, I think is the coolest thing on the entire Canal Saint-Martin. And I remember going here years ago with this Frenchman, took me around there, and he told me about this. And I was like, the what? What movie? What are you talking about? And then I had to, of course, look into it. The Hotel du Nord, it was built in 1912. It was purchased by Émile and Louis Davy in 1923. Their son, Eugène, lived there and worked there at nights and was taking notes of the people that were coming in to stay in the hotel. Eugène was a very accomplished painter, but he started to write and even displayed his art at the Salon des Indépendants in 1927 and 1928. But in 1929, he wrote The Hotel du Nord. The story centered around a young couple that came to stay at the hotel with a pact of a double homicide or double suicide, I instead. Things go awry, and a prostitute and a pimp become involved in it. And in 1938, it was made into a movie by Marcel Carmé.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah. But that's not even that coolest part. So the book was very popular. It even won a Populus Prize, and of course became a very well received and still beloved movie. That's actually the creation of a movie that makes the hotel itself so popular. So the way that they did this too was really cool. When Carme made it, they decided not to film a single shot there on the canal, but they actually recreated the entire life-size version of the area, including the canal and all the buildings, and even digging an exact size trench to fill the water, and also the cast iron bridge. And they did this in a film studio outside of Paris. The building was 7 feet deep, and sadly nothing remains. But because of the novelty at the time, it drew people to the canal to see the real deal. So nobody was going there because at this point, nothing was, is very industrial. It's not what you see today and all the little shops and cafes and stuff. That's kind of only in the last, 2 decades. But back then, everybody saw this movie. And then because it was an exact recreation, they wanted to go to the actual Canal Saint-Martin and to the Hotel du Nord to see it themselves.
I'm really surprised they did that much work when they could have just used the Canal Saint Martin. I guess it was too difficult to film there.
Well, yeah, and especially, if you do that now, there's so many permits and costs, and it's expensive and everything that goes into it. But to recreate the whole entire thing, and if you talk to French people of any age, they know this movie.
Wow, have you watched
which is
it?
Yeah, and it's I could I'll look it up and I'll link it on my website because I actually saw it. I found it just Googling it online, and you can watch the whole thing online. So
Interesting.
I'll put a link to it on my at claudiahemingway.com under the show notes. And so you could watch it yourself, because I watched it about months ago. So I'm sure hopefully it still works.
Mm-hmm.
It was really cool. But in 1970, the building was in such bad state that it was going to be demolished, and the French were up in arms and demanded it had to be saved. So in 1989, it was classified as a historic facade, and the building was rebuilt, and the facade was recreated to the exact specifics. So it's really cool that it was a movie that had kind of nothing really to do with the actual location, other than that's what it was.
Yeah,
That it ended up saving it.
that's really crazy. I want to see that movie because, yeah, the canal is definitely not what it was back then. Like you said, it was much more industrial. Now it's like a total hangout bar area.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in Amelie, Amelie, there's a scene in Amelie where she's skipping rocks up on the bridge.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where, you see some of that. I mean, I'm sure it's only a matter of time before, well, she probably won't. Emily in Paris probably won't go over
Yeah,
there.
maybe.
Maybe in a future season, she'll, slum it on over to Canal Saint-Martin.
Season 3.
Yeah, but the canal itself was created first under Napoleon Bonaparte in 1802, and it was finished in 1825. It was needed to bring water into the city to help ward off of the disease, and also for the boats to bring the important things like wine and cheese to the city. It was all paid for by taxes at the time on wine.
What?
So you could see how much wine, and taxes they have, because they could build an entire canal. But sometimes they try to crack down and say no drinking wine on outside along, especially during COVID.
Mhm.
They got really mad when everybody stay outside, but then everybody was sitting out along the Seine and the canal drinking wine, and they tried to outlaw that because obviously you had big groups of people. But I think it should be okay for the canal because that wine actually paid for it.
Exactly. It's not fair.
I know, it's like the Wallace fountains, it was this time wine turned into water, and same thing with the Wallace fountains. He was trying to get rid of drunkenness, and so he created these fountains for water.
It's our right to drink along the canal.
It is. It should be a right. They should have their own wine. They should have their own label.
That's a great idea.
But that sounds kind of great. Canal Saint-Martin. I don't know if I'd want to drink wine label Canal Saint-Martin, because they'd even think maybe it was using the water. But at the time, the area was lined with industrial warehouses and not as many residents. In 1860, part of it was covered and also transformed under Baron Haussmann. The canal ends at the Arsenal and eventually into the Seine and can be traveled daily on a tourist bus. Have you ever done that? Or boat, sorry.
I haven't done the
Have you
canal
ever done
one.
that?
No. I've rented
We
the
should do
electric
that.
boats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've
Oh,
rented the
that'd be
electric
cool.
boats. That's super fun, but I've never done like the big boat tour through the locks and all that. But the electric boats are cool.
Yeah, because there's even ones you could get and have for like a dozen people or something.
They can get really big ones. I usually always do it in the summer, and you can bring food and wine on the boat. It's super fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems really fun. I'm just also kind of obsessed with the whole canal because my grandparents did the Canal du Midi back in like I think it was in the 80s. And that was the one where you take it and you're just traveling down the water all the way to Carcassonne.
Oh,
And I have all these really fantastic pictures. My grandparents did it with another couple, and my grandpa he loved stopping because you'd have to stop, and somebody'd have to come out and open the lock and do all the things, and they'd go stop at the little towns to get bread and cheese. And I really want to do that someday. And maybe I'll start at the Canal Saint Martin.
yeah, I would say that's a good place to start. I wonder, they still do that
Yeah.
boat, like go all the way to Carcassonne?
Oh yeah, there's a couple of them that go through France. I think there's 2 or 3 different canals that you could do through France.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's really cool. I have some really great pictures my grandparents took. So that's definitely one of those things I would love to go do because they did that. So maybe we'll have to get a couple people because I think you have to like sometimes like the little boat guy has to, the bridge guy has to come and do it all.
Yeah.
But I think some of it you have to do yourself.
Oh,
So
wow.
we're gonna need Giuseppe.
Yeah, definitely. We need help. We need strong arms.
We need Giuseppe to do all the manual stuff for us. But in 2016, there was a long 4-month project, and you might remember this. They decided to clean the canal, and they do this every like 10 or 15 years. And they actually emptied the entire canal, which is something you could do because it is a lock system. You can't do that, on the Seine. But they actually emptied the water and they cleaned it out. And in there, they found like bikes, so many bikes, hundreds and hundreds of wine bottles, chairs. They found tables. They found the most strange things just down there underneath, on the bottom of the canal.
And they find a dead horse.
And I think so, yeah. And I mean, there's also the story of they say that there's like a crocodile that lives there.
Yeah.
If Oliver G has a thing saying there's a crocodile that lives there. He talked to a woman that said she saw it, but I don't know if anybody else has seen it. But it's a fun story to think, that I don't know how much I'd want to be sitting by the edge of it if there was a crocodile. But a walk along the canal in the spring or the summer is a great time to go because it's just everybody is lined up there, hanging out and just watching the day pass, especially when we have those late days, which is not what we have right now. You keep walking down. If you walk down the whole way, there is the Square Frederic Lemière, who was once a French actor. He was popular during the 18th century at the Avenue de Crime, which was well, we should do one about that because that was a really interesting. It was this whole line of a street lined with theaters, and they called it the Avenue of Crime because the theaters had these plays. It wasn't about you're going to go there and get pickpocketed. It was because these plays were there showing, they had plays about crime and all these other things. And so it was kind of an interesting, really interesting place to be at that time. But a lot of those theaters are now gone.
It's like true crime podcast before podcasts.
I know. Well, we're going to have some of those, some true French true crime things coming up that we're excited about. But if you keep going down across the Avenue de Faubourg de Temple, it is a marker indicates the victims of the horrible November 13th, 2015 terrorist attack, because that is where that happened. And just recently, there's been 2 more things just in this last week that we're recording this that has happened in that area. But thankfully, one of them was stopped before anything could happen. But just past the marker of that horrible event is a life-size statue of a young lady, and she's known as La Grisette. And it's done by Jean-Bernard Descamps, he created this in 1911, and it's named for and dedicated to the girls that worked in the nearby laundrette. And if you remember from our favorite ones we do about our fancy prostitutes, the courtesans, there's all different levels. So there was the grisettes, the lorettes. The grisette was kind of the bottom of the barrel of in terms of the prostitutes, and they were called grisette because they wore these gray dresses and they worked in the laundry shops. And so that's where they got the name Grisette. So this is kind of dedicated to those girls. And so they were these lower level young girls that basically supplemented their income with sexual favors. But the dresses that they wore were gray, and so that's why they were called that. But she looks really sad and lost at the end of the Square Jules Ferry. But it is interesting that it is. I think that's probably a memorial more to what they did as far as working in a laundry than them being low level prostitutes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But Jules Ferry was the mayor of Paris for a very short time after they ousted Napoleon III. He was a fierce opponent of the emperor, and he constantly had a target on his back and was killed almost killed 2 or 3 times, depending on which stories you want to believe. But there's a large monument of him as well at the end of the Jardin des Tuileries. It's right there on that lower part at the end, looking at the Pavillon de Massin. Down below on the Rue de Rivoli side, there's this huge monument that's dedicated to him, and he was only a mayor of Paris for a short period of time. But at the end of the street, you could also see another reminder of that November 2015 terrorist attack. But we can see the Bataclan. It is there just across from the Square May Picari. It was named in 1920. The square was from Marie-Jean Picari, who was born in 1898 and created the anarchist trade unionism paper, Le Redrete. It was published from 1974 until his death in 1983. And the Bataclan, last year it was saying that it was for sale. So I haven't seen anything if it was sold or anything like that. But hopefully if somebody does buy it, they don't take it down. But I don't know, maybe some of the people families that were a part of that would like to see it gone, or they leave it up as a reminder. But it is a really cool concert hall. My friends, Dandy Warhol, said that they had performed there a couple of times and it was one of their favorite places to ever play. But it does have, a pretty haunting, sad reminder there, of course.
Yeah, I imagine it'd be hard to keep it open considering everything.
Yeah, it is. And they just had, it was just back in, I think, June or July that the trial ended for the lone terrorist that survived that entire thing. And of course, he got life in prison, which is the strongest sentence they will hand down in France because they don't have the death penalty. And life in prison is one they very rarely do. So I think that was kind of a no-brainer. That he was going, hopefully he'd see the end of his time in prison.
Yeah.
But right here we end at the Église Saint-Ambrose. It's a lovely neo everything church. It's got neo-Gothic, Romanesque, Byzantine church. Is a feast for the eyes. It's very, very tall. Bell towers are equal to the size of the Grand Notre Dame de Paris. And under the porch above the doors, the allegories of eloquence and theology surround Saint Ambrose. And inside there's a fantastic stained glass window with murals of the life of Saint Augustin, which of course there's the Saint Augustin Church over in the 8th. That's not very far from the Madeleine, which is also great. But there's just so many, a lot of people, especially when you come to Paris, and for the first time, and most people are there, 4, 5, 7 days, and you have a big list of things, of course, you want to see. So definitely, if you come to Paris and you've been there a couple times, definitely head over to this area because there's some really lovely churches. There's some really great little stores and cafes, and in that area, in the 10th, I mean, a lot of the cool, trendy restaurants are popping up in that area, but trendy, but also fantastic. Because it is a little cheaper to be in the 10th as opposed to like the 5th or the 6th or the 2nd. So, it will now get more expensive because of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it isn't really, there's a lot of really cool things to see there. It's fun just to walk up and down. And then there's is it the La Villette? That's kind of the other waterway that kind of ends up at the top that you can walk down as well. And there's like a theater that's there. There's theaters on both sides. There's a hotel that's right there on the water. So there's a lot to go and see, and it's definitely like, your second or third visit to Paris. Go, venture out a little farther and check some stuff out.
Yeah, definitely. If you come in the center in the summer, just rent one of the electric boats. You can rent them online. I do say you should book in advance. You can book on the website, and it's really fun. It's something different to do. And
Fun.
everybody, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you check out Claudine's website, claudinehemingway.com, and tune in next week.
Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, claudinehemingway.com.